In 2018, I began my voyage back home. And so when I say my voyage back home, I'm meaning my return back to God, the source of all, back to myself, back to living from my heart space. And it wasn't something that I was consciously doing, but that it was time for my soul to return and remember to come back home, to self. And the way that it actually occurred for me, my return was through a separation at the time from my ex-spouse. And that particular separation resulted in me journeying into 3 months of depression and anxiety. And in those 3 months, I was so extremely disconnected from myself, disconnected from the things that I enjoyed doing, disconnected from my friends. And in that time, I had no idea whatsoever of who I was. No idea. Because up until that point of my life, I lived the life of the status quo, right? I lived the life of everything of what the American dream was, right? To go back to school, try to, get your degrees and attain as much as you can, all of the different things, get married, and all of those things are absolutely beautiful. But I had no knowledge of self at all. I had no connection to this planet. I was just living a life, right? And living a life from a very unconscious state. And so when I speak of from an unconscious state, from a state of disconnection, very disconnected from life, disconnected from the source, disconnected from what it actually means to be a human here on planet Earth, right? So at some point, the depression has started to take a toll. And I remember calling out to the only thing that I knew at that time is God. And I was never a religious person. I was never a spiritual person. There was something that was always in the pit of my belly, that I was generally a seeker. I lived the unusual life from my rest of my family. Like, I remember around the age of 25, I started attending a church. And that actually happened because I was coming from out of a relationship at that time, and really just was looking for peace, looking for belonging, looking for love. And I just randomly got up one day and went to this church. And I remember also in high school, around the age of maybe 16, 17 years old, I randomly started going to visit a lot of Islamic spaces. So I was studying Islam, and I actually studied Islam from going into my junior year until after I graduated from high school. So there was a part of me that was generally seeking, but at certain points of my life. And I'm not really sure why I never really carried on the journey with those particular spaces for long periods of time. But I know when I started going to church, I think I stayed at church for maybe about 6 or 7 years. I even was baptized and things like that. But in 2018, after I had gone through a very serious bout with depression and anxiety after my separation with my ex-spouse, I started to just scream out to God, right? And again, I wasn't a very religious or spiritual person. I knew of God, but I didn't know God. And for me, it was really about, I wanted the pain to go away, the pain of depression, the pain of not knowing who I was beyond the marriage. And all I could say was like, the day that I decided to reach out to God, I was laying on my living room floor, and all I could say was, who am I? From the depths of my soul, from the soles of my feet, I just wanted to know who I was, because I had no identity for myself outside of the marriage, right? And shortly after that, I'll say maybe about 2 weeks, I experienced what many people are identifying as a spontaneous spiritual awakening. And I began my path. I began my path of going deeper, my path of meditating more. I spent a lot of time in nature, hours in nature. I would take hiking trails several times a week. And I began meditating, and I began to meet other people reading certain types of metaphysical books and all types of books that was literally a part of my transformation. And these were books that I never had any interest in whatsoever, like no sort of interest in this type of material whatsoever, but they started to come, and eventually I started to meet certain mentors. But basically this journey since 2018 was about discovering who I was. So the discovery was the initial phase, and then it came into more of a remembrance of who I am, to the core of my soul, and then really developing a relationship with the Creator, with the source, with God. And that has been my journey. And I live a life now, I'm literally fast forwarding a lot, but I live my life now strictly for God, because I know that my life has purpose here, and I live my life according to that. And I enjoy life and I have fun, but literally my steps are ordered with God. And sometime even I was just like having a conversation with my mom today, and we was talking about something I can't remember, and I was like, God ain't telling me to do that. You know what I'm saying? And it's not like I seek God for every small thing, but I have said yes to being the vessel for that energy, that source to move through me on planet Earth at this time. And so I literally live my life dedicated to that. And it has been a beautiful journey. It hasn't been easy at all, because for me, I would say it's been about trust. It's been a lot about trust. And my journey has oftentimes been about me and God only. That so many people have been removed from my life, so many material possessions, and I've had to take my Jesus journey, my journey of the wilderness with God definitely over the last 5 or 6 years, but very intense in the last maybe year. Because I had to leave what's familiar. I had to leave my family home. I had to leave the place that I've been knowing for 21 years in Florida, and take the journey with God. And when everything else and everybody else is gone, and you realize your source is only from God, your meals, your transportation, your housing, your shelter, all of those things. Where am I supposed to be going? What am I supposed to be doing? And you realize through those really tough, difficult, dark moments sometimes that when you realize all you have is God, all you want to do is live your life with God. You know what I'm saying? And what some things that I started to realize even recently is, even when it comes down to intimate relationships, that when my partner comes in, this was literally my prayer the other day, because I generally don't always think about relationship, but because I love relationship, I love love, it comes up sometime, right? It comes up sometime. But what I realize is that, and I've been married twice, and I said to myself the other day, I was never really married until now. I was never really married until now, until I realized that my relationship with God is a marriage. It's my first marriage that I've ever been, and I've been married twice. And so my prayer the other day was, may my partner's vessel be available for God to come through and love me the way that God loves me. And I won't accept anything else than that. I won't accept anything else than that person being available as the vessel for God to come through and love me the way that God loves me. And I know that that will be a divine union. So not to release, stop there, because there's so much more to my life with God than just being in an intimate partner relationship. And it will happen when it's time. And I know that that person is here with me on this planet. I know that their vessel is available for God to come through and love me through that vessel the way that God loves me. And the same here, that my vessel is being pruned for God to come through and love him the way that God loves him. And you literally practice that. I'm literally practicing that now, just in my daily life. People that sometimes are difficult to love, you love them anyway. You don't cut off. And I'm getting emotional because the love that moves through me is so powerful. And you don't cut off God's ability to move through you so that it can love a person who's probably unlovable. And so that's when I get a chance to put my ego aside, not allowing anyone to trample over me, setting boundaries, of course, yes. But it's like, I don't shut off my love. I don't shut off my love. And there's been points in my life that I've shut off my love. When people hurt me, when people disappoint me, and different things like that. But when you have said yes, and I remember driving home from work, I think it was in 2018 or 2019. I remember driving on one of the major highways here in Florida. And I said to God, send me, I'll go. And for me at that time, it was words. It was just words. But now it's like, once you speak these words and you agree in your mind, body, and spirit to be the vessel for God. You don't really get to choose who you love, how you love. You learn to discern, right? You learn to discern who. You learn to discern who is able to be in your space. I would say that you don't allow people to show up. And that's a part of God's love, teaching you how to discern, right? And learning how to set boundaries. But it's like, there's no greater love. And once you have experienced this love, one, there's no going back. And why would you want to? And you won't accept anything less than God's love from anyone. Not from your mom, your dad, your sister, brother, friends, your partner. You don't accept anything less than God's love. And for me, that's essentially why it's so important that my partner's vessel is available for God to move through, to love me the way that God loves me. And there's so much to share. And the way that I share is through storytelling. I don't have like an agenda. I don't have things written out. There may come a point where I have like a whole things written out, but one of my gifts is the gift of storytelling. And this is the way that I have to share with the community here on the community, is through storytelling. And so I wanted to share just briefly my journey back home, back to God, back to the source, back to the Creator. And the way that I walk this life, I don't walk this life without God. Everything, no matter what it is, I walk this life with God. And it's not always an easy walk. It's not always an easy walk. It has become easier. It's become easier. And some of the reasons why it hasn't been an easy walk, because there's a building of trust as well, especially if you've lived a life at some point where people betrayed you, or you felt like life betrayed you, or you felt like you couldn't count on God. There's also moments where your ego kicks in and you're like, no, I actually want to do this instead of doing that. Or I want to do this right now. I don't want to wait. I don't want to be pruned for it. I don't want to be prepared for it. You know, we want things now, and that's an ego, and that's okay. We need the ego to an extent. But I just wanted to share that with the community. This was super random, as most of my videos are super random. And this is the way that I am deciding to show up. I don't have all of the fancy things to do, and all of that. And it may come a time where my videos are a little bit more fancy. And when the time comes for that, then great. If it never comes, that's okay too. This is the way that I am needing to show up for now. But I wanted to share that with the community. I love you all so much. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.